Hello and welcome. This is Connie Reagan Green, and I'm thrilled that you are joining us today. I have my special guest, David Perdue, who is the co-founder, or I guess just the plain old founder of MyNAMS, Niche Affiliate Marketing System. David and I first connected in 2010 or 2011, right around there, and we became fast friends. Now I can't imagine my life without him. He has taught me so much. He's like that big brother that you always wanted to have. So I'm so excited what you're going to be learning. We're going to be sharing a topic that's just dear to my heart and has made a big difference in my life. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Connie. I'm so glad to be here. And it turns out that I'm about everybody's big brother as I'm getting older, you know.
But we're still 39.
I know. I used to be the youngest guy on the block, and now I seem to be the oldest guy on the block sometimes. But it's better than not being on the block. So I'm very happy to be participating here. So Connie, I'm really excited today to talk to people about this topic, storytelling. I didn't realize until I really got into teaching this a few years ago how much storytelling is embedded in me. It's something I love, and I know you do too, because you're so involved in the film festival there locally, and film is all about story, right?
Yes.
So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to flip over to a set of slides that I have for teaching people how to use a simple template to, and you're going to get this template, by the way, to create your stories. And this part of it is, I think, essential for doing business online today in this Web 2.0 world that we live in, for sharing and being able to tell stories that have a focus and a point and are share worthy. That's the key for everything that we do online for business today. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that completely.
Yeah. Okay, so here come the slides.
All right.
And just bring this up. Okay, there we go. So you should be seeing the front page there. And if you would, type in the chat box that you can. Everybody see that just fine. We'll go through this pretty quickly. And if you have any questions, type in the chat box as well, and we'll try to get all those questions answered for you. So we're going to focus today on what's called the hook. There's 7 steps in this template that we're going to use. And I'm going to go through all 7 steps, but we're going to really focus on the hook, because the hook is the thing that gets people. And it's like a headline. If you don't get people from the beginning, you're in trouble. Now, one of the things that has happened to me is people say to me, "You're a born storyteller." And the truth is, I never met a born storyteller. It is a learned technique. It is a learned strategy. It's a learned process. So this is what we're going to work on today, is teaching you how to become a storyteller and why it's so important. And this is a question for you guys. Why do you think it's so important? I can tell you this is the key to storytelling right here. Stories sell. That's just the fact. Stories sell. People want to hear stories. They don't want to be sold. But once they hear a story, they develop that process of know, like, and trust. And that's how they get to know you. And that's how they end up buying from you. So stories have to be incorporated into your daily activities as an online business, any kind of business, to tell the truth. So first thing I want to do is talk about the old days. I'm an old guy. I love the old days, right? So in the old days, when I was in the newspaper business, many years ago, I was a reporter and a photographer and an editor and a publisher in the newspaper business for about 17 years. This is the way we worked. This box on the left. Advertisers and publishers were the source of one message. They focused on that one message, and they drilled that message into our heads via newspapers, magazines, TV, whatever medium they could. So they used every medium they could to distribute one message from one source to as many individuals as possible. This is today. And if we don't adapt to this today, we die. Because in today's world, the advertisers and the publishers try to get as many stories shared as possible. And that's the key today, is new marketing is one message from many sources reaching many individuals. Stories get, I think I actually shared probably 4 or 5 things on Facebook today that were stories from other sources that I didn't necessarily follow, but I found the stories interesting. So that's what we do, is we add value by sharing what other people write and tell. So you want to be shared as well. That's your goal. So what's the problem? You don't have any stories. My stories aren't interesting. I don't want to tell people about myself. These are things that you may be telling yourself in your head right now about your stories. You may not believe that you have any stories, but what if storytelling is simpler than you think it is? And what if it is so simple, I can give you a template that's just 7 steps that will help you tell stories with a point. And I can give you that template free today at the end of this presentation, because I've developed this process over time. And it's not a big secret. This is the way stories have been told. Persuasive stories have been told forever. And I'm just documented this and am training people on how to use each of these steps as we go through it. So it's about persuasion. The first step is the hook. The second step is the setup. The third step is the parachute. The fourth is a theme. The fifth is the transition. The sixth is the sell. And the seventh is the tie back. We're going to talk about all of these a little bit, but like I said, today we're going to focus on the hook. We'll get into why that's so important. So today's plan is we're going to go into 5 steps to finding stories. That's really important to you, is how do I find these stories? Then you're going to get an assignment. I forgot to tell you, you're going to have to do a little work today because we're going to make this interactive. You have to do an assignment, so there's a little work. Then we're going to review that 7-step template based on the work that you're doing. We're going to focus on the hook. We're going to break down a simple hook. Then we're going to do assignment number 2. Aha, a little more work. Uh-oh, people are going to have to do something here today. You're going to enjoy it. It's not painful. Then you're going to be able to download the templates that we gave you, and you're going to find out how you can get more. And then there's one very special bonus at the end that I want to talk to you about as well. Now, the first thing I want to do here is show you how one of my students used this storytelling template. This is Tim, and Tim has created a video here, and I'm just going to play this video for you. We're going to go away for 1 minute. The video will play, and then it will we'll come right back after that. And Connie, you won't see the video except in the sidebar, and you can unmute it on your end if you want to listen to it as well. Everybody else should see this full screen. Okay, here we go.
When I saw it, my heart sank. I thought I had just killed my boys. Friday, March 2nd, 2012 is a day I'll never forget. The day a tornado ripped apart my hometown. My boys didn't die that day, but 5 of our neighbors did. The next day, March 3rd, 2012 is also a day I'll never forget. Because on that day I learned one very simple yet important lesson from one t-shirt that made a difference in my life and in my community. A lesson I want to share with you, a story that will inspire you. T-shirts that inspire, the $89,000 t-shirt, how one t-shirt inspired and healed a broken community. Available at Amazon.com.
Okay, so you should have been able to see that video, and that video played and the sound came through. And if it didn't, there's a link down here for you that you can go watch it as well. It's nams.ws/heart-sank. So what Tim, let me tell you a little bit about Tim first before I go into the rest of this. Tim is a guy who was on a webinar with us, and he said after the webinar, he sent a message in the chat box and said, I just don't think that my business is suitable for online. And so he told us that he'd been a graphic designer, and we asked what his business was. It was a physical business, and the physical business was his physical business was creating t-shirts, and he wanted to create t-shirts that inspired people. And then he told us the story about how he created a t-shirt that actually generated $89,000 in donations to rebuild his community. And that was a massive story. I mean, it was just a hugely inspirational story. And I was delighted to hear it and encouraged him to write a report about it and do all kinds of things to market that. Now he's doing T-shirts all the time. In fact, he kind of has, he's overloaded with T-shirts for causes now. And that's what he wants to do, though, is T-shirts for causes. So he finds that kind of as a part of a ministry that he does. So it's working out well for him. We're going to talk about that more in a few minutes. But first, I'm going to, first I wanted to talk about why I'm qualified to talk about storytelling. Like Connie said, I'm the founder of NAMS, and it's the Novice to Advanced Marketing System. I've been online training folks since 2005. I do niche and affiliate marketing and build training products, and we have a lot of our own training products as well. We have live and virtual events. Connie's been to a lot of our live events as a speaker and a teacher. And we have a lot of virtual events, and Connie has done a lot of those virtual events as well with us, and we're really appreciative of her teaching folks what she knows because she's a master. We have over 135 instructors. We have thousands of students, and we have the MyNAMS.com membership site. Okay, that's the resume part, right? So here's the fun stuff. 17 years in the newspaper business, like I said. I'm an Alabama football fan.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. And I converted Connie, I think. Roll Tide. And I'm an Indiana basketball fan.
Go Hoosiers.
That's right. Go Hoosiers. You got it, Connie. You know them all. That's great. Now, my wife, here in this picture, this is Charlesa. She graduated, has a couple of degrees from Alabama. I graduated from Indiana. We live in Alabama in this log house that I built myself in 2002. Connie has visited this log house for a really nice mastermind weekend that we did there. A lot of fun. Time to do that again. So I love to travel, and I've been all over the world. I've been to 5 of the 7 continents. I've traveled to Africa, South America. I've not been to Australia, and I've not been to Antarctica, but I've been to every other continent. I've been to China, Southeast Asia. I've been to a lot of places that I love. And one of the reasons I love that is because I'm a photographer, been a photographer for 30 years, and I'm a storyteller, so I pick up lots of stories there. Little known fact, I was a baseball pitcher until I was 48. Not softball, baseball. And I have 2 rebuilt rotator cuffs to prove it. I love passive income.
Were you a Rembrandt?
I'm sorry?
Were you a Rembrandt when you were pitching?
No, Rembrandt.
Someone who paints the corners.
Oh. No, I was a wild man. I was more like the guy from Major League who I scared more batters than I did strike them out. They didn't like to hang in there with me because I had a screwball that would scare you to death. So it was a sidearm screwball, so it looked like it was going to cut you in half. But anyway, so I love passive income, as does Connie, and everybody loves my wife. Right, Connie?
Yes, we love Charlesa.
Sweet, sweet woman. Okay, so now you tell me which was more interesting, the resume stuff over here or the fun stuff over here? Connie, what do you think?
The fun stuff.
Obviously the fun stuff, right? Because you get to know me more here. This is stuff that other people, other people have these qualifications. These things over here you may not have known about me, and you may have some interest because those are things that you can relate to as well, right? So how many stories were in the fun stuff? 3, 6, 9, 12. How many would you say? How many would you say? Well, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bullets. There's at least 9 stories, right? But I think there's probably unlimited stories just in the photographer for 30 years or the travel piece. I'd say there's at least hundreds of stories just in these 9 bullets. But you have to know how to dig out those stories so that they are stories that people can relate to and that they're interested in. And that's what we're going to talk about. So there are 2 types of stories, chit-chat and persuasion. Chit-chat. This is the stuff we do when we're talking to friends. How was the ball game? What'd you do this weekend? Where are you going to for Thanksgiving? What are you going to do for Christmas? When's your birthday? Did you have a good birthday? How's your dad? Those kind of things. That's chit chat. It's small talk. It's stuff that we do to relate with one another. It builds relationships. There's a value in chit chat and small talk. Some people are good at it, some people not so much. I'm not so good at chit chat, but I am pretty good at persuasive stories. Stories that are persuasive move the listener to an action. And that's the key behind persuasive stories. So meet my dad. This is Royce, R-O-Y-C-E, Royce Perdue, like in Rolls Royce. And he's 86 years old here. He's the nicest guy in the world, not a persuasive storyteller, but he tells stories all the time, and he's known for telling stories. People like me dread those stories because I've heard them over and over and over for about 60 years now. And but friends of my dad's love his stories. They love to hear those stories. But why aren't they persuasive? Because there's too many tangents. They're about people that we don't know. We can't relate to them. There's no specific purpose to the story. They are stories about building relationships. That's what he's doing, is building relationships. And he's often in a same kind of crowd. So he lives in a retirement home. So he plays golf, or did play golf, before he broke his hip last year. He did play golf with kind of the same kind of people that he is, the same political beliefs, the same kind of church-going folks. In fact, they go to the same church, most of them. And they're his golfing buddies, and they love him. And so they tell stories to each other that reinforces who they are. So they're really doing chit-chat. They're bonding is what they're doing. Now, the difference in persuasion is you empathize with the listener. I'm sorry, with the audience. You empathize with the audience. You're the listener. The key to being a good storyteller is to listen first. And you want to identify with the audience. You want to focus on the audience and focus on the problem, because the audience is telling you what their problem is. So once you've done all of these things up here, you can turn it with a transition to the solution. If you are listening to these folks and empathizing and identifying and building the relationship, then you turn to the solution that will help these folks with their problem. So you focus on results when you deliver a solution. You tell them that you've got something that has the results. And the conversion piece of this is when you get them to say, yes, I'm interested in knowing what that solution is. We do this all the time with the products that we do, with sales letters, and with the thing I love, by the way, about the Jeff Walker product launch system is it's all story. I mean, it starts with story, it flows through story, the stories get more intense, and then it ends with story. So there's always a solution there that solves the problem that is the focus of the story that he's talking about. So that's persuasion. And that's what we want to do today, because storytelling is about creating trusted friends who do business with you. That's kind of a key, right? You want to build those, and Connie, you're a master at this, building relationships with people who become trusted friends who do business with you. The reason you can make so much money with a small list is because you build such great relationships with people who want to do business with you, correct?
Yes, I believe so, for sure.
Well, that's what other people tell us about you, so we know that's true. But I'm sure you have some objections coming up here. So you're probably saying, I don't have any stories. Nothing interesting happens to me. Why would anyone want to hear my story? And I don't know what makes a good story. So if I can show you what the secret is to telling a good story that would open a vault and be able to allow you to see exactly what you can do to create persuasive stories, I think you'd be interested in that. And I'm going to assume that that's why you're here, is because you need to know the secret to that, right? So,
yes.
Step one, you want to identify story sources. We're going to go through 5 steps here, by the way, to help you identify things in your daily life that you can turn into persuasive stories. And there's a couple of keys to this that are really important. The first is you identify daily events. You want to list your events to build your story around these events. But the key is just taking an inventory kind of what happened to you today or yesterday or in your history or things you want to see happen in the future. It's just an inventory of events. So the next thing is identify a universal truth. So a universal truth is that element in that event that you can pick out and everybody's going to relate to. That's a universal truth. Some people call that a universal of emotion. I was reading in Writer's Digest. I've been a subscriber to Writer's Digest for 30 years now. And I was reading the other day an author who said that the reason that his stories, his novels, what he focused on in his novels to make them become New York Times bestsellers was a universal emotion. That's the key to a great novel, is a universal emotion. And that's the same thing in my mind as a universal truth. So once you find that universal truth, the step 3 is the bridge. How does that universal truth translate to a problem? And if it's a business problem, it's something that you can try to persuade people to the solution that you're trying to get them to. If it's not a business problem, it could be a political problem, it could be a religious problem, it could be a money problem, it could be a relationship problem, it could be anything. But let me tell you, you want to be able to persuade people, even in your own family. I mean, I'm guilty. I use this technique on my wife sometimes because I need to persuade her occasionally. So in the business world, you would say something like, it's the same in your business. Or if you are a business owner and then you say, da, 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 whatever happens, right? It is fill in the blank. This is happening to you. Okay. The business issue. You're going to come up, this is a key. You're going to identify a problem. And you always agitate, make that problem bigger and better. So if you're in business, you always want to make sure that you are telling people, they got a problem and they probably don't know how big that problem really is. That can be a disastrous problem, or it can be and it can be, whatever the problem is, if you just expand it out, it can always lead to something terrible. And you want to paint the terrible for just a minute before you get to the solution. And then the step 5 is the solution. Tease that you have a solution. That's the what. And your solution is about the steps and actions. That's the how. So you want to reveal a piece of the how to show utility, but you want to focus on the what, that you have the solution. You want to give them enough of the how that you're credible, and then you stay in the what so that they have to request the rest of that solution. You want them to request the rest of that solution. That's what a story does for you, a persuasive story. So here we are at assignment time, okay? So it's going to involve you making a list of up to 10 situations that you were involved in today, okay? Don't think about storytelling at this point. Think about the first things that come to your mind. This is toward the end of the day on the East Coast, so you probably have an opportunity to think back over a few things that have happened today, right? So I'll go first to give you an idea of how to do this, but start typing your events that have happened in the chat box. And this will give you the ability to use these as we're going forward. So, for example,
all right, and I'm playing as well. Is that all right, David?
Oh, please. I want you to play.
All right.
So let's see. Today I got up early because I knew that the heating and cooling folks were coming to the house at 8 o'clock because we made those arrangements yesterday. Our compressor on our heat pump went out last Thursday, so it's pretty cold. We've had the coldest days of the year in the last 2 days, of course, and that's when the compressor always goes out. So the heating and cooling guys came on Friday, told us the compressor was dead, so we'd have to do without our heat pump all weekend long and get a new heater today. Well, they didn't. I called at 10 o'clock and said, where are you guys? So that was the first thing. So there's a universal truth in there too about expectations and delivery on promises, right? We could talk about that. You start looking for the universal truths in these things right away. So then let's see. So I sat down and I sat in my chair and I started, this morning I started writing some emails, and I was trying to get some work done that my daughter was pounding on me through Skype that I was supposed to have had done last week. Connie, I'm telling you, ever since my daughter got back, I am not in control of my time anymore. So, you know,
Good.
my daughter back in my business, and she's running the show, and I hired her to do that, and she's doing a great job with it, but I got a lot more work to do.
I love it.
So, so the universal truth in that might be that there's not enough time in the day, that you have to plan your time better, that you have to knock off the important stuff first. Maybe it's the prioritization, but there's these things that are just small topics that you can write any story about from the things that have happened to you that day. As I'm sitting at the chair, I let the dogs, or as I got up from the chair this morning, I let the dogs out. And Lila,
Who let the dogs out?
That's it. Who let the dogs out? And Lila, my wild dog, took off into the woods chasing a deer. And we never get deer up to the house, which I'd love to see deer closer to the house, because we live in this 95 acres of woods, because my dog chases them away, right? So what's the universal truth there? I don't know. Maybe it is, I guess if you want something different in your life, you have to build different processes, right? So you have to make changes, and that would be the kind of thing that we could talk about there as universal truth. So people should be typing in the chat box what your events for today are. So Connie, give me some examples of yours.
All right. Well, 7 years ago, I had a Chinese exchange student, and his name is Hans, and he was just a delightful young man and fit right into the family. It just seemed like he was a family member from day one. So we've stayed in touch with him, and now here it is all these years later, he's in law school in the Midwest, and I invited him for Christmas, and my family's so excited that he's coming. And I heard today that he's going to be driving from St. Louis, you're actually from Chicago to Los Angeles on Route 66 to be able to arrive here and stay for about 3 weeks. So we're so excited about that.
So what's the universal truth in that?
The universal truth in that is that, I was thinking, like, am I living vicariously through him? But I don't think so. I think it's being able to see that joy of a young person doing something that I did. I mean, I've driven that Route 66 so many times. Seeing it through the eyes of somebody younger and somebody from a different continent, I think that's part of it.
Okay.
What that means to us.
And how could you bridge that then, Connie, to an article, a persuasive article about your business at some point?
I think how I would relate it to my business is that here's someone from the other side of the world, yet he still understands social media, understands everything, and that, I've gone from a person that just always thought so locally. I always thought just of where I was living, and everybody in my world pretty much lived within 50 miles of me. And now most of the important people in my world live very far away. So the fact that I've now become involved in a global business, and how the world has changed, with all that being possible.
I think that's a really great topic. There's so many things you could drag out of that, though. There are a lot of truths in that. You can start writing that article and actually figure out exactly where you want to go about Hans, because I bet you could write 5 or 6 articles in the next few weeks about Hans if you wanted to, because of all the things that you just said. But, here's a kid that came all the way across the world and is willing to do what it takes. Boom, there's a universal truth, willing to do what it takes, right?
Yes.
Get from Chicago to you. He's got an advantage because he's younger and going to school, and he's not as technophobic as we were growing up, right? So
right, yeah, because the very first time he was at my house, David, he borrowed a laptop. He didn't have a laptop because he was, high school, and he said, "I need to download the Chinese alphabet. Is that all right?" And so that he can, stay in communication with his family. And I said, "Okay." And then I saw what that was, the Chinese alphabet. It was huge. It was like Wikipedia.
It was like what?
Wikipedia.
Really?
It was huge. And I thought, gee, I don't know if my little laptop's going to have that much memory.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So you get my point, though, that you could really create a lot of stories based on that one event, and that's what people do. I mean, when when you talk about people who drive from location to location without story plans or ideas, they're creating stories along the way because of what happens to them. And that's what we're talking about today. So Kit says in here, painters arrived today at 8:30 to finish a 4-day job that has turned into an 8-day job. One wall opposite the kitchen wasn't included in the quote.
Oh, no.
So let's see. Jennifer woke up with a cough and first noise out of me was a croak. Ate warm things for breakfast, started laundry, decided to go to Target before and other household tasks, got at least one thing on the list. Oh, forgot at least one thing on the list. So I'm going back to Kit for a second. Universal truth about the house painter thing is it's never what you think it is, right? There's I mean, you can have a plan. You can always have a plan. This is one that comes to mind for me right now, is you can always have a plan. Plans are great. Be willing to adapt. You got to always adapt to your plans, right? Let's see. And the one with Jennifer woke up with a cough, doesn't feel good, not at the top of her game, forgets one thing on her list when she went to the grocery store. That happens to all of us as well, right? So how does that relate to your business? So if it were me for my business, if I send out an email or whatever and I have a broken link, for example, I could always write a story about it using this kind of an example and get a lot of people who would say, oh yeah, I understand. In fact, I would get a lot of emails back saying, hope you feel better, and then they click the link, you know. So you're exposing yourself a little bit and giving them an opportunity to relate to you. Cheryl said she's grocery shopping for Thanksgiving, and that's all she says. And I can tell you, I feel like that for Cheryl as well, is that's enough said. Grocery shopping for Thanksgiving a couple of days before Thanksgiving is going to be, you know, it's a battle plan. It can be a battle plan for going out there and shopping in this kind of world, in the hectic seasons that we're in. Okay. Let's see, Carol says, what about confidentiality? I have no shortage of stories, but how much is appropriate to share with other people? We're going to talk about that, Carol, because a lot of people, if you notice, that was one of the objections I laid out there was, you know, I don't want to tell people about myself. I don't want to tell them everything about myself. And you don't want to make yourself, you don't want to tell enough about yourself that you turn people off, that you embarrass yourself, but you want to tell enough about yourself that people can relate to you as a human being. To me, that's incredibly important from a story perspective. You agree with that, Connie?
I would agree with that, yes, yes.
Okay, and Cheryl said she paid her contractor a lot of money for finishing the deck, negotiated 2 offers on a home. She's had a busy day. Let 2 older sheep out of the corral so they could hang up around the house. Met with a subcontractor to pick up and remove the last bits of old deck. Posted my first poll on Twitter. This could be about productivity. You know, that's the universal truth, and what I'm hearing here is that she is a very productive person. She's not letting anything stop her today. So she's moving right along. Adrian, hi Adrian, bought items for Kohl's for Amazon. Got 56.03 cash back, 15% off order, and free shipping. So congratulations on that, free shipping and 56.03 cash back. That's always good. So Adrian, this sounds like found money to me, and you know how much I love found money. So to me, there is the whole cash back craze could be a lead-in to all the credit cards that are giving cash back, all of the offers that people are giving you, all the time, the seasonal offers that happen at this time of the year or any time of the year, really, because every seasonal offer, there's a Valentine's Day sale, there's a Memorial Day sale, there's a Labor Day sale. There's always a sale that is seasonal. So there's a universal truth, right? So that's how this works. You just identify your daily activity and you think, how can I tie that into something I'm doing in my business? And that's what we're focused on today. And then persuading people to take an action. That's what the rest of this is about. Okay, so how do we introduce a persuasive story? We want to make sure that we stay focused, that we are interesting, that we're engaging, that we're useful and memorable. Those are 4 essential criteria. in telling stories. Interesting, engaging, useful, and memorable. If you do those 4 things, you're going to get shared. So interesting is in the eye of the beholder. Engaging, you can ask for interaction. You can do a lot of tricks to get people to engage with you. Useful, obviously one of my favorite places to go read useful information is Digital Marketer. Ryan Dice, they do blog posts that are step-by-step blog posts, and those are incredibly useful. And you learn so much from those blog posts that that you end up clicking on the embedded links to find out more. That's what useful is all about. It's so useful that you want to find out more. And I just told you about that story, so it was memorable, and that's how you get more memorable stuff going, right? So if you remember it, what do you remember about the stories that are memorable to you? And you want to make sure you're doing some of the same stuff. Be memorable. Okay, remember this template. What you're going to get is an infographic that looks like this, and it has the 7 steps on it. And then we're going to talk about each of those 7 steps all along the way. That was the hook, the setup, the parachute, the theme, the transition, the sell, and the tie back. And as I said, we're going to talk about the hook. So here we go into the hook. Did you know you only have 3 seconds or less to hook me? That is, that's a, it's been going down all the time because of the Twitter world that we live in. 140 characters, that's about all you get. And remember, it started with MTV long ago when they were doing music videos that people were saying, boy, those cuts between the scenes and the videos are so fast, and people hop around and do da, 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 da. It is a short attention span world that we live in, 3 seconds or less. So can I tell you a quick story? This is a key phrase for you. So can I tell you a quick story? So you see what I did there? In 3 seconds, which is that's how long it was for that little 3-second ball there to drop. That was 3 seconds. I did something there that caused you to give me a little bit more time. And that is a 2-step process. The first is ask permission. Can I tell you a story? And if you say, no, I don't have time right now, we're done. But if you say yes, then you're going to give me a little time to tell you a story. And it's going to be more than 3 seconds. So you've gained time by asking permission. Then you set the hook. Then you set the hook. So now we're going to walk through a little bit of a process here and take a look at an example. So is this interesting to you? This is a picture of my family's grocery store from 1972. I took this picture in 1972 when I was visiting my grandparents. My grandparents owned this little store, Purdue's Grocery. It's not very interesting. It's just a block building. It's interesting from a historical perspective, but that's about all, right? There's no reality, no personality to it. It's not all that interesting. Now, this is my grandmother. This is my grandfather. These are 2 of my uncles. My dad was the 3rd boy out of 8. This is when they only had 2 boys. So this is becoming a little bit more interesting because you're beginning to relate to who they are. My grandmother and grandfather ran that store for 30 years. A little bit more information, still not all that interesting.
Your grandmother looks a little bit like Charles.
She does, isn't it weird?
But don't tell her I said that.
I think it's a little weird. I've noticed that myself. So my grandfather shot a man in that store without warning or provocation. Now, right, exactly. See, so now it's a little more interesting, right?
Yeah.
Now, and you're curious, right? Without warning or provocation, did he just walk up to this guy and shoot him? What happened? So now we want to know more. So what's the point? My grandfather shot a man in that store without warning or provocation, and it's a great lesson in marketing. So there's my point, right? It's a great lesson in marketing. So now I've got an unanswered question here. What's the great lesson in marketing? And why did he shoot this guy in the store? So we're going to, and the next thing is you can always go way overboard. And this is a little bit way overboard, right? David Perdue was raised by a bunch of gunslingers who danced around the law, but managed to build a thriving, legitimate business in an impoverished Kentucky town. So that's a little bit too far, right? It's interesting, but it's not exactly truthful. So what's the hook? My grandfather shot a man in that store without warning or provocation, and it's a great lesson in marketing. Amaze, shock, anger, scare, identify. This is your only chance to connect on an emotional level with the audience. They will click away to something more interesting, if not hooked. This is no time to be shy, but leave an unanswered question. Remember, I said we had a couple of unanswered questions there. That's really important. And promise an answer later. So let's break it down. My grandfather shot a man. This is personal to me, so I am telling you that this happened to me. I'm sharing something with you about myself. And let's see, Carol, it was Carol, I think. So Carol, I'm telling you something about myself, that this is actually my grandfather who did shoot this guy. And so you're getting to know that I come from a pretty weird family in an impoverished Kentucky town. I'm opening the door to a relationship. That's what I'm doing by sharing myself. In that store, setting up the scene so you begin to picture the situation. If I tell you the man was sitting eating bologna and cheese on crackers with 6 or 8 other people around a coal-burning pot-bellied stove in the winter while they told jokes, you begin to picture that, right? So you know you're inside the store sitting around a pot-bellied stove, 6 or 8 people there. What I didn't tell you is that my grandfather was a gun and knife trader. That's one way in this store that he made his money. By the way, that store was the only building except for the house that they lived in this town. So people came from miles and miles around to get their groceries and hang out in the store. And that's where they got their mail and they got their gas, and it was the hub. So my grandfather was the storyteller in the store. Without warning or provocation. Remember, he shot this guy without warning or provocation. Now you're asking questions. What did he do? Was it an ambush? Was it in retaliation for something he did earlier? Was he really shot? Somebody said, did he shoot him with a camera? No, he didn't, but it's not as bad as you think. And I bet you're beginning to suspect that, right? So 2 things here. Seriously, it's a marketing lesson. How is this a marketing lesson? That's your curiosity kicking in. You're either interested in marketing or not. If yes, you want to hear the story. If not, you still may want to because you want to know what the resolution is here. So the great marketing lesson. What is the great marketing lesson? So I'll tell you just quickly, so I don't leave you hanging. I did promise you an answer here, and it's kind of an inferred promise, right? It's a great lesson in marketing. So I'm kind of telling you that there is a lesson to be learned here, right? And I'm going to tell you what that lesson is. Well, the lesson is about demonstrations. My grandfather was demonstrating this gun, and he thought he was going to be really cute and get everybody's attention. He was actually using a physical hook. He was actually trying to get people excited about this gun. And he walked over to a friend who was sitting on a chair, pointed the gun at his leg and pulled the trigger, and the gun went off. And there was a loud bang. But it was a starter pistol, so it was shooting blanks. The guy fell over and rolled on the floor, thought he'd been shot. Everybody laughed except the guy on the floor. He didn't think it was all that funny. And my grandfather, after that, the great lesson in marketing is you got to be careful about the demonstrations. You got to be careful about what you're willing to go to to go out on that limb. So to Carol's point, this went too far. And you don't want to go too far in what you share with other people either. So marketers often go way too far. And that's kind of the point that I was making here. Okay, so remember Tim's video. What's the hook in that video? Type in the chat box there what you think the hook is in that video. It's pretty easy. In fact, I'll tell you, it's on the screen. It is. When I saw it, my heart sank. I thought I had just killed my boys. There's just enough information there for us to be interested and to move forward, right? Just enough information for us to ask questions. Just enough information that we want to hear the rest of that story. And the best stories, and Tim didn't do this, by the way, and he and I have talked about it, the best stories leave the unanswered questions to be answered at the end. And I think it was like 15 seconds into this, Tim said that his boys were fine, but 5 of his neighbors died. So the hook here is, when I saw it, my heart sank. I thought I had just killed my boys. And then if he'd left that unanswered to the end, he would have had a really nice story with a great tie back. That story did not have a great tie back. So we're going to get into what that means as well in just a minute. So we're focused on one of the 7 steps right now, the hook, but to tell a persuasive story, you need all 7. This is from the story template that we give you as part of the templates today. And you can see here, we give you all of the templates: the hook, setup, parachute, theme, transition. And we're not going to go into what these are particularly because we cover that really well in the templates themselves. But I want you to choose one of your ideas and work on a hook. So Connie, you want to work on yours. Come up with
Is it all right if I switch to a different story?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. But everybody out there, I want you to type in your chat box a quick hook. And remember, a hook adds a lot of curiosity. It doesn't give too much information. And it also is interesting enough that it continues, that it encourages you to continue reading or viewing or listening, whatever it is, right? So let's see, how can I give you a hook? On today's, I'll give you a quick story that happened to be on the way to work. So on my way in today, I stopped at Dollar General. And I don't know if you have a Dollar General near you or not, but Dollar Generals are highly discounted stores all over the South. There's one on every corner. And they call it Dollar General because everything is cheap, like dollars or less. Or some, not always, but they're real cheap. So I went in to get an item that was $1. Woman in front of me had $95 worth of stuff from the Dollar General. That's a lot of stuff at the Dollar General. It was like 2 carts full of stuff. And of course, there were 2 of us in there, and I was incredibly impatient. So let's see, what kind of a hook could I write about that? Let's see. Who on earth spends $95 at a Dollar General? Might be a question that would get people in there. Or when I'm in a real hurry, how could I end up behind a woman who had 2 carts loaded of stuff at the Dollar General? Or, this just off the top of my head, but it's those kind of things. And let's see, Cheryl has written in, my hand shook as I sat down to write the check. Yep. That would be a good one.
That's a good one.
Jennifer says, how could I have made that mistake? That has a lot of curiosity. It's a great headline. It's a great, and think subject lines too, because subject lines are always great hooks. If you don't get people hooked in the subject line of your emails, and they have to be pretty short, then you're going to have issues because they won't open your email, right? That's the key. Connie, what'd you come up with?
Well, I think theirs are much better than mine. Mine
Okay.
is, well, my story, it's about my uncle that he's 90, and I showed him how to help small businesses, and they pay him to help them, and he's still doing it. So you're never too old to do something, and helping others has its rewards.
Okay. So the curiosity piece, helping others has its rewards. How could you make that more curious? How could you take advantage of the curiosity in that?
How to take a trip? How to take a trip to Europe, paid for by just helping your friends, something like that.
Yep, that'd do it.
Yeah, because they went over to the UK, and the money for that entire trip was from what he earns.
In 2003, my wife and I went to Ethiopia, Africa. We went to Kenya and Ethiopia and South Africa, actually, for a month. We left with $6,000 that the trip cost us $6,000. And I say cost us because it really didn't cost us anything. We took that entire trip and ended up with $2,000 in cash when we got back. That would be a good hook for travel, right?
Yes.
We went to Africa for a month and came back with $2,000 more than we went with. So people want to know how that happened. And that would be a hook that I could get people to read a story about that travel trip. So, all right. Jennifer says, tell me what the reward is. Then I want to know how you got it. That's a good point about yours. And Steven says, I had just finished kegging 10 gallons of hard cider. When something wonderful happened, I'm sure. Adrian says, how I found free money. And I think she's referring to me. Oh, no, for hers, because she got $56.03 back. How I found free money. Absolutely.
That's a great one.
That's a great one. Okay, so that would be how you write a hook. So we're going to move on into the next thing. So why tell persuasive stories? Whether you're self-employed or working for others, you need to tell persuasive stories because you're going to want more results. You want to provide more value. You want a better reputation. You want better relationships. You want a bigger following, and you need to be more engaging. And you want to make sure that you've identified and weeded out the correct audience. When you tell stories, people are going to relate to you, or they're not going to relate to you. You're going to polarize the audience. And what you don't want is to have people in your community who aren't interested in you, right? So that's what stories do, is help you actually weed those out. Do you want more invitations to speak or to write books or to be part of a book? Connie does a lot of publishing, so she does a lot of collaborative work as well. So, you know, if you've got good stories, she's going to ask you to be part of her book. That's an invitation that you'll want if you write good persuasive stories. So that's what the advantages are of good persuasive stories. So here's our 7 steps again: the hook, the setup, the parachute, the theme, the transition, the sell, and the tie back. So the hook we talked about. The setup is, we did a little bit of that when I showed you my grandfather's stuff, my grandfather's store. And we talked about the guys around the potbelly stove. That's kind of a setup. The parachute is when you drop right into the action. Think of Mission Impossible or great action movies. They start with action. And then they heavily influence it with curiosity. So you can actually turn the parachute into a great hook if you drop right into the action of it. And the setup can come later and answer those questions that you have in the beginning about why this is happening. So the setup really gives you kind of a comfort feeling. That's what you want about the setup, is a comfort feeling. The theme is the point. The theme is the point. So for example, with Adrian's How I Found Free Money, the theme on that would be how to get cash back. So cash back really becomes the theme of that article. And then you would lead into the cash back process or the passive income or whatever it is. The transition is from, and the theme, by the way, is threaded throughout your story. So it's in the beginning, it's in the middle, it's at the end. It's just kind of hovering over the entire story. The transition would be from the parachute to the dropping in of the action to the transition to the sell. The transition would be, remember we said, and your business, you may be experiencing this in your business too, those kind of transition phrases move from your personal story into the business problem, right? And the sell is the solution. The problem we're talking about over here, and in the theme in here, we're talking about the problem. The sell is the actual solution. We talk about the solution and why the solution, whatever it is, and it may be that you just want people to like your story. The sell always contains a call to action. The call to action can be anything from raising your hand to nodding your head to liking the story to giving you money to buying a house, whatever it is. That is the sell. Then the tie back is wrapping all of that up and ending with what you started. So for example, in Adrian's example of getting $56 back, she would want to say, something like, you know, next time I go shopping, or next time I decide on a credit card, or next time I look for ways to create passive income, I want to make sure that I include this technique that she described in the hook, and so that I can get another $56.03 back. And that wraps the whole thing up in a nice little package. Those are the 7 steps. Now, you can download this here. I'm going to put this in the chat box, so you should be able to see this in just a second. Let me grab this. Okay, so this should be in the chat box, and you can go get this template in the chat box. There's a download button there in the chat, and that will give you, you just click that, it'll open up in a different tab, and it's a zip file, and you can download this 7-step template and a couple of other templates and examples of stories that we have in there. And that should be really helpful to get you started. Now, the next thing that I wanted to tell you about, though, is basically I want to give you an example of what other people say about stories and why stories are so important. Rudyard Kipling, if you know anything about English and Indian literature, was a great poet and a great writer, right? Rudyard Kipling, he's one of England's greatest novelists. And if history were taught in the form of stories, it would never be forgotten. Just think about that. The reason I love historical novels, and I do, I read a lot of them, is because it gives me the history that I'm really interested in, but it's said in a way that I'm really entertained by. And I love history, not for dates and numbers, but I love history for the story. And so that's one of the things that you want to make sure that you're doing, is when you're telling stories, you want to tell them in a way that'll never be forgotten. Brandon Sanderson is a novelist, New York Times bestselling novelist, and he writes fantasy and mystery kind of things. It says the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think upon. And I like that a lot. Questions to think upon. That's the curiosity piece that we're talking about. Joan Didion, a great 20th century literary figure, said, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. It's basically that important. Tell ourselves stories in order to live. So what else do you need? We're here to help. You need more than just templates. You need more practice. You need to review other people's stories. You need other people to review your stories. You need examples. You need to see, let me tell you, writing good persuasive stories is just like any other technique. You've got to work on it. You've got to practice it. You're going to need real support. You're going to need a little kick in the butt occasionally about your stories. And you're going to need more and more and more and more examples. And we give you that in a private Facebook group that we've added to this entire package that I'm coming up to teach you a little bit more about the entire 7-step process in our storytelling course. So Sherry Frost said, golden, this is the best way to describe David Perdue's storytelling workshop. The thought process behind each of the steps in the template ties everything together and keeps me from rambling and losing track of the point. I now look at things differently and can easily see a story in just about anything. This is key. Can easily see a story in just about anything. And Ute says, this was profound turning point. This was a profound turning point for me while building my niche. David masterfully taught and showed us how any story can be effectively crafted for any purpose without losing its creative life by adhering to this framework. This workshop I consider a must, regardless of your background. So what we're doing today is offering this storytelling course, Monetize Your Life with Stories That Tell a Point. We're offering this to you today with a Connie discount for 3 days. The link is nams.ws/CRG stories. CRG obviously is Connie Reagan Green Stories. That'll take you to the sales page, and there's a promo code there for Connie. You just put that in, Connie, and it's all caps when you get to the cart. And I just checked it, Connie, before I came on here, and
yes.
It is not $97. It's $77.
Ooh, I love it.
I thought you might.
I love it. That's fantastic. May I throw in a little bonus?
Oh, please.
All right, because what I would love to do is I would love to brainstorm with people, because I realized during this call that, you know, my stories, they're not as spontaneous as they used to be. Perhaps I'm a little rusty with my storytelling, which it's embarrassing to admit, but it's the truth. So what I'd like to do is, anybody who comes in during these next 3 days, I'd like to get on a brainstorming session with just them and I, the two of us, and let's share some stories and see if we can use these 7 points and come up with something that's
Wow.
workable for a product or a course or whatever we're working on.
Connie, that's an awesome offer because you are a great storyteller. You may be a little rusty if you think you are, but I know that I have to work on it constantly as well, because you can I get lazy with my stories, with my emails, with my posts, because
Yeah.
sometimes I just want to get right to it, you know, but other times I want to build that relationship. And that's the key with storytelling, is helping people move to that persuasive place. So that's an awesome offer. I've got a little special bonus here for you as well. So this thing gives you the 7-step story point infographic we talked about, story worksheet, the story evaluation Excel worksheet as well. What that gives you is a 5-step. Remember those 5 steps that we went through that included the identifying the universal truth? That's the key to taking your daily events. And we help you with a spreadsheet, actually identify that universal truth and all 5 of those pieces, so you can identify the daily events that mean something, or any events. They don't have to be daily, but any events in your life that you can go back and pull out and create stories around those. So that Excel sheet, while it's really simple, is really helpful. Then we give you a lot more sample stories to look at. There's a 4-hour video course from us where we actually walk through students' courses. The first 2 hours is me teaching the 7 steps. The second 2 hours is critiquing and reviewing the stories that people submitted. And then we did that again, not the critiquing and reviewing part, but the update and a more detailed in our version 2.0 of this course. And we've added all that together. And we've got a private face group as well, where we actually review what people have. And get peers to review stories as well. And we've just started that Facebook group, and it's getting pretty active now with the people who are in on that storytelling piece. This is a really important tactic and strategy that you need to learn, a technique that you need to learn. So we want to support you there as much as possible. So like I said, it's not 97, it's 77. You have to use the promo code Connie. And the link is nams.ws/CRG stories. Now, I'm going to put this in make sure that you got your templates already. You click that link, because I'm going to remove that from the chat box and put in another little box there that will give you the opportunity just to click that with a buy now. You just click that button and it'll take you to the page. That's in your chat box. Now, you'll notice too, it's got a timer on that chat box. So when you get to the page, it's going to show you exactly how much time you have left to get in on this at that price. So here's my bonus. Get in before we hang up, and I'll personally review one of your stories with a video critique after you take the course. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah. And
That's fantastic.
it's fun, actually. I love doing it.
Yeah.
But it's very helpful to people to see where they can get a better storytelling process. In fact, here's an example just from today. This is Holly, who got in on this last week, maybe 2 weeks ago. She took the course. She wrote the story. I went through the story with a Jing video. It's less than 5 minutes. And I went through the process and showed her did a critique of her story. Now, this wasn't part of the process. Would you like to go through this story, by the way, and do a little review real quick?
Yes.
Okay. So don't forget that chat box will open up, that buy button in the chat box will open up in another tab. And I'm going to open up a, let's see, what am I going to do here? I'm going to open up a tab and go to Holly's story and just walk through this so you can see it. And let me get it done here. Okay, so there's that. Sorry, I'm just taking a second. This is kind of like on the fly. I wasn't really going to do this part. So let's see.
But we're glad you're doing it.
Let me change this over. So you see the entire screen. So here's Holly's. This is in our storytelling group. This is Holly's story coming up here and it's what you saw on the screen. Now, when I went through this today on the video, and I'll show you the video, what that looks like as well. So let's see, that's back over here. So this is a Jing video, and basically I've gone through the process, and it's loading and playing, and I walk through this, and then I walk through that process with her there. But let's see, here's Holly's story. So one of the things I told Holly was, the headline's not bad. How dreaded phone call triggered a career change. That's not bad. But I really think that the great hook is right here. I was a phone call phobic. I was a phone call phobic, so I would never have thought that a single information interview with someone in a school district would lead to a career. Oh, she's changed this. Since today's critique, she changed this. So she's already made the corrections that I gave her about this, because what I did was, I wish I had made a screenshot of this before. Let me see if I can get that video back and show you some of the stuff that she did. So here you'll see in her first paragraph, I told her, this is a great headline, but here it said, I would never have thought that a phone call for an information interview with someone in a school district would lead to a career change from corporate training to higher education and my favorite job to date, but it did. Okay, so what's the problem there? That first sentence is way too long, right? And the point of this first paragraph is to get you to the rest of the story. So if you put a period after change, let's see, I would never have thought that a phone call for an information interview with someone in a school district would lead to a career change, period. But it did. So that's a good hook right there, because then you think something's happened. I'm interested in knowing what has happened. And her website is about career transitions and communications, right? So let's see, I want to show you some other stuff on her previous page, and we'll see what she's done. The setup was right here. I was ready to do something new. I did what I feared doing. This was a great subhead. I did what I feared doing, but the next paragraph got really muddy. I was stuck on how to do more meaningful work, an acquaintance who worked for a school district, and there's just way too much information there. The next paragraph is pretty good, but the key is this: when you get down to despite the fact, I think I highlight that here, yes. Despite the fact that I totally resisted calling strangers. That's the issue. That's the issue that she's having. That's the problem that she's trying to identify in this story. She didn't want to call strangers to get referrals. This can work for you too. That's the transition. This can work for you too. And let's see. Then it gets really long and too much information. She talks about the information interview here, and that's when it hits you that this is about information interviews, but she hasn't set that up very well. So I told her that that needs to be at the top. Under this can work for you too. Information interviews are, and we'll see what she did when we go back over to her page. Because you need to identify information interviews and really explain what that is there for people. Then the next part was she gave away the farm right here. Right here. Here's what you need. Here's why you need information interviews. So she gives you 5 bullet points here, and people will look at that and they will say, oh, well, this is great information. I'm done. Go away. And that's what they'll do. They'll click away right there. What she wants is for you to schedule your 30-minute phone call over here. So this call to action needs to be incorporated into this story. So what I told her to do is make sure that she got that call to action, reduce this, only give a little bit of this information, add that call to action. Your next steps should include making the phone call. And it doesn't anywhere in there. It doesn't include, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what the information interview is and how it can help you. So I hope she's fixed that. Let's see what happened here. Yep, I was ready to go 12 years ago. Good setup. I did what I feared doing. I had few contacts in Florida without connecting with enough people. I was stuck. More setup. Okay, easier to read paragraphs. That's good. You may be wondering, you may wonder how this call to an education manager in a local school information interview. Let me first explain about information interviewing and how it can work for you. Much, much better transition, much better focus on the theme of this thing. So the theme is information interviewing. You can discover where you fit in the world. An information interview is a short meeting with someone who can begin to answer your questions about a new job. So that's a much better, much more direct call, right? Okay,
Yes.
Let's see. Okay, so it gets clearer right here. So here she goes. She did do that. You can get past your fear and move into a more meaningful work with guidance and support. I was fearful and struck. You have to be. You don't have to be. Find out how to use information interviewing and other techniques with support to get past your fear and get excited about what you do. Contact me today for a 30-minute discovery meeting to find out how that phone call led to my ideal job in higher education. So there's the call to action. Much better call to action. So there you go. And there it is again at the bottom. You don't have to do a long call meeting. So that's how a process really helps. She used our template to do this. It was very helpful for her. And that's, you can see that's the kind of changes she made just with a short review. Connie, that makes sense?
That makes so much sense. And I think the way that you lay this out in your training, because you're very organized and you spend a lot of time in the thought process with all of this, I think that this makes this really doable for all of us. And I'm excited to be part of this process to really get my storytelling back to the level that it was and beyond.
So Miguel is saying he's having issue with the coupon code. Let me just come over to the page and see what's happening here. We'll get that up again. So if I click on, remember the CRG stories, we click on that and it should open up in
Yeah, this is just an incredible value, David.
Thank you. I tried to make it incredible value.
Yeah.
Because you know what I think of you.
We're part of the Mutual Admiration Society.
That's right. Well, I'm glad that it is mutual.
I have so many stories based around NAMS. I mean,
I know.
those have become the thread of my life.
Okay, the coupon code must be in all caps. We put it in here. Promo code right there. Apply. And that drops it to $77.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't all caps.
Yeah, it needs to be all caps, Miguel. And that will change it to $77. So you just put the coupon code right here and click apply. You may not have been applying it either. Some people miss that.
All right, well, I look forward to connecting with new friends and old and really getting these stories going because, you know, I just love the stories of my life. And I can remember when my mother, when I was little, a neighbor said to my mother, one of the little girls in the neighborhood said, "Why do you have so many stories?" And my mother said, "Well, when you grow up, you'll have lots of stories too."
That's right. What we want to do is not use them as chit chat, but yes, we may use them as persuasion. So that's the key to this whole thing. Yes. And that's why we've done this. So people can get in here, NAMS.ws/CRG stories, and use that promo code Connie. And we'll get you in today and get you into the Facebook group and get started right away. So it's an instant download. You will get an email with your access information. You want to make sure that you look for that email from mynams.com, and it will show up and give you your access information if you're not a member of MyNAMS already. So we'll make sure you're in there. Okay. Connie, any questions?
I'm sorry?
Any questions? Anything that we need to?
No. I am just thrilled that you came and did this presentation for my group, and can't wait to get started. Thank you so much. This will make such a huge difference because it takes everything that we do online and brings it to a human level that we can all do. It's just a matter of learning this process and practicing it, getting the feedback and refining it, and it will make all the difference from now on.
It is fun too, by the way, so you'll really
yes.
learning this. So thanks. We'll talk to you soon. I appreciate it, Connie. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.